Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited, in association with Road to Perdition writer Max Allan Collins, presents the upcoming audio drama True Noir, the Nathan Heller Casebooks, based on his 19-novel series about Nathan Heller, once a corrupt Chicago PD officer turned private eye to the stars. Starring Todd Stashwick. You loved him in Card Season 3? You didn't like him very much as the Deacon in 12 Monkeys, but he was awesome anyway. Plays Nathan Heller. Look for the upcoming crowdfunding campaign on the internet, somewhere near you. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and the perhaps never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett. I'm, of course, Robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is, believe it or not, Robservations episode number, wait for it, 943. My God, coming at you in, well, actually, it's HD. It could be 4K, but it's HD 60 frames a second for you gamers. Maybe one day it'll be 120. I don't know how that will benefit you. You'd see my face closer up, maybe in better resolution. I don't know if that's such a good thing. Don't worry, the lights will get tamped down a little bit. I've got diffusers. It's a slow process. I'm kind of getting there. It's getting there. I did speak to Max Allan Collins today. We will be launching our crowdfunding campaign for the Nathan Heller podcasts. People want to know, what is this? What do I keep talking about? Well, I'm going to use my channel to promote it. So last August, Mike Bodden, my business partner, and I got in touch with Max Allan Collins. It turns out Max Allan Collins, who I was a big fan of, he's been writing forever. He's written many movie novelizations. He took over, actually, the Dick Tracy comic strip from its creator, Chester Gould. He took over Mickey Spillane's My Camera character as the executive producer of the upcoming My Camera movie that Skydance is making. But he also wrote the graphic novel that Road to Perdition is actually based on, and he's written sequels to that graphic novel. He also created Miss Tree. If you ever read that comic, starting in the 80s, I did. And turns out he watched our physical media show. And my business partner Mike and him knew each other. And we got in touch and we were talking, and I said, we should do something together. And I told him, we were talking about old-time radio dramas and stuff, and I was talking about how I really like things like Audible's The Sandman, which is incredible, 13 hours. I mean, I loved what they do with The Sandman, and I'm like, I grew up, I loved the CBS Radio Mystery Theater that was hosted by E.G. Marshall. I always loved audio dramas, but now they're so sophisticated, unlike, say, books on tape that people really love. What if we did a full-blown audio drama? And my mandate to him was, it's going to be like a movie, but without a picture. So it'll be fully mixed in like 5.1 and hopefully Dolby Atmos, but that'll be a stretch goal. And I said it'd be the kind of thing where it'd have to be so sophisticated that for the premiere, I want to rent out a movie theater, get an audience to come, and turn off all the lights. make it like pitch black. They won't let you do that in a movie theater. You have to be able to see the exit signs and all that. But I was like, that's what I want to go for. And he was like, that sounds really good. And I thought we could do My Camera, but because Skydance, is making the movie, we couldn't do that. So his books, the Nathan Heller books, which are really cool because they start in the 1930s and they go all the way up to the 60s. And Nathan Heller, kind of like the character Woody Allen played in his movie Zelig, he kind of is at the right place at the right time. And his cases sort of dovetail with actual historical events, which really turned my crank. And I'm like, that sounds great. And the first book that he wrote is called True Detective. Well, we couldn't use that as a title. So we came up with True Noir. And so the first book deals, this is a true story, with the assassination of the mayor of Chicago. And Nathan Heller starts out as a beat cop on the take at the time. And it's a very hard-boiled noir detective story. And because I had met Todd through Terry Metalis during Picard Season 3, I thought he'd be great because he's from Chicago. And so what we did was we recorded a proof of concept that you're going to get to hear when we launched the crowdfunding campaign. You can hear it both in 2-channel stereo and in 5.1. You can download the file and listen to it how you want. And we're going to adapt the entire first book. We're going to do 2 books at once, but then turns out the first book's probably going to be 8 to 10 episodes. And we have some of the money, but I want to do things like create a vinyl box set of like 9 or 10 or now maybe 11 records in one box, as a stretch goal. And all the music is original. Alex Bornstein, who wrote the theme that you just heard, played over Robservations. That's sort of the Nathan Heller theme. He wrote that, and there's actual real musicians playing the saxophone, clarinet parts. And it's going to be a first-rate thing, and we're going to have a lot of other actors. It's WJ, it's SAG. So hopefully you'll look out for it. We'll be probably launching that crowdfunding campaign. Beware the Ides of March, because we're going to launch it, and you're going to see a lot of cool video and a lot of cool stuff that we've prepared for the crowdfunding campaign. We're going all out, so we need your help. And we'll see what we can do with it. Anyway, that said, boy, you're reading a lot of... I'll freely admit, if you've watched this podcast for any length of time, you've watched me for the last 9 years on the internet since I started on AMC Heroes that became Collider Heroes with the late, great John Schnepp and John Campia. You might know I love movies. I've loved movies since I was a little kid. I've been a movie fanatic. My first favorite movie, I've told, you can all say it, the original Byron Haskin 1953 War of the Worlds, produced by George Powell. That was my favorite movie until I saw Logan's Run, and then Logan's Run was my favorite movie, and then I saw Star Wars, and that became my favorite movie. And then I discovered Stanley Kubrick, and of course, his movies are like my favorite movies, but now there's, it depends what day it is. But the thing is, what was always interesting to me and of course I grew up wanting to make movies. I went to college and studied film, got right out of college and went into the industry and kind of have eked out a meager living since then. I've worked on big movies, mostly small films. Still doing it. Still love movies. Still love the process, the art of film. Really enjoy every aspect of it. Really enjoy the business. But even I can tell you, the business is a mess for a number of reasons. Movies went global. And they were always, movies were something that the planet loved, but in terms of a studio's business model, they went from looking mostly to domestic and then licensing out to distributors around the world to being global. They're making movies now for the global marketplace. And as the business has really changed over the last 30 years, the emphasis on studio films became, there used to be an incredible diversity of the kinds of movies studios would make. They would make comedies, they would make dramas, they would make horror, they would make sci-fi. They would make all these kinds of things, but they didn't cost, compared to now, they didn't cost very much. Studios were in the business of making movies anywhere from, $10 million to $50, $60 million. That was kind of where the studios lived in the 80s and the 90s. And then we had Terminator 2 set that $100 million bar. And then after that, people start spending more and more and more money. Now, what's interesting is because they're going for that global marketplace. But is that such a smart thing? I don't know. And then, of course, the reason that the streaming world became so attractive to studios is that the studios have never wanted you to own their movies. Even though the home video revolution made, I've cited these numbers before, but a movie like The Lion King, the original animated The Lion King, did very well at the box office, but in the ancillary markets, meaning in cable and home video and everything, a movie like The Lion King grossed $850 million in home video revenue. One movie. That shows you how profitable the home video market was, especially the DVD market, because suddenly everybody was buying everything. And that lasted for about 15 years. And not a bad run. And it saved a lot of low-budget films. I mean, a lot of low-budget movies could triple or quadruple, especially genre pictures, on their home video releases. All of that's going away. Physical media is going away because streaming killed it. Now, on paper, streaming looks pretty good. You know, you've got your Disney or your Paramount or your Universal, and you have, or Warner Brothers, you have your entire history. Warner Brothers turned 100 last year. Disney turned 100. Sony Columbia is turning 100 years this year. 100 years of product that is sitting in your vaults or sitting there. You put it up on a streaming service that's yours, although Sony doesn't have their own streaming service. They were pretty smart. But what happens is people quickly see and go through what they want. So what happens with the streamers is they constantly have to be making new product. And Netflix had a decade head start on all the streamers. They went from there. They had a very smart business model with DVDs. You could rent DVDs through the mail. And then they were the first people to start a streaming service, licensing out everybody else's material until they got into the business with people like David Fincher making their own content. House of Cards was one of their first big shows with Kevin Spacey, obviously, and they went from there. The problem is, with streaming, other than your subscription money that you pay, there is no other revenue stream. So we've been through this ad infinitum, but is that the proper use of that term? I don't know. We've been through it a lot. But and we see that if they make a movie like The Gray Man for $220 million that the Russo brothers directs with an incredible cast, Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, who doesn't like that? Chris Evans playing the bad guy. But it's $220 million that goes, they put it on Netflix, and there's no other revenue stream. And the thing is, where do you get that money back? Now, the thing about streaming that made it attractive to these studios is that they had monthly cash flow that you could count on. You could go, okay, we have this many subscribers this month, and we know that each subscriber, aside from getting special deals with their phones or whatever, we can see exactly how much money that we're bringing in, which for studios, that was something they didn't have the luxury of. The problem was everybody went all in on that, and they realized quickly that they were spending way more money on programming than they were bringing in. So that was a problem. And they couldn't keep up. So what happened is the analytics, this idea, because now the studios are run by bigger and bigger corporations. So a couple of things happened. With Wall Street's influence, and you had companies like AT&T that wanted, AT&T was building your systems to building the internet to watch things through their systems. So they figured, why shouldn't we own content creation as well? So we're making the content that we're pushing through our pipelines, and why shouldn't we do that? The problem is making movies is a very specific kind of work, and it attracts a very specific kind of people. And it's the one business in the world everybody thinks they can do. Oh man, I have an idea for a movie. How many times have you heard that from people in your life? Maybe if you live in, Hackensack, New Jersey, you might not with Miss Tessmacher. But if you live around here, everybody thinks, whenever I go somewhere, they find out I work in the entertainment business. They're like, I have a really good idea. And that's, in theory, that is kind of nice, but it's really hard to do. Making good movies is incredibly difficult. I think that there's a little bit of alchemy. There's a little bit of Rumpelstiltskin in every movie, spinning straw into gold. You got to Rumpelstiltskin that shit. You got to hope that there's a little bit of alchemy, a little Tinkerbell magic dust that helps your project go. And at the same time, everybody wants a say. Everybody wants their pound of flesh. And because they've given you the money, and the thing is, everybody thinks that because they've watched movies that they know everything there is to know about movies. But they don't. but they don't. But everybody wants to be involved because there is, I think, a mistaken perception about the people that make movies because they see the glamour of it all. And there are two very different Hollywoods. There's the power broker, gatekeeper, agents, managers, lawyers, studio executives. There are those people. Those people live in an entirely different world than the people that actually make films. The people that actually make films, I mean, they're just like, give me my money, let me get to work and leave me alone. Leave us alone is basically, and those people are great. Those are my people. Those are my Romani caravan people that travel from place to place to place. They set up the show, they put the show on, then they wrap the sets, they wrap the tents, they move on and do it again, hopefully. That's very different than the people that broker the deals. So it's a weird world. But anyway, there's a tale of two stories that came out today. Obviously, it's March 1st. Beware the Ides of March coming up. But March 1st, we have today the kind of movie we dream of getting, that we've been getting so few of, a truly game-changing, epic science fiction film with a visionary behind it, a group of people working at the top of their game, and they spent $100 million less than Gladiator 2 spent, and $150 million less than it cost Fast X to get made. What does that say? See, it says something about the business. I won't get into that here, but it certainly does. But Dune 2 is a masterpiece, and while it's not for everybody, I say it leans more to the art house side of things as opposed to the traditional crowd-pleasing, popcorn-munching, even though there's a great popcorn bucket, popcorn-munching, action-adventure, thrilling science fiction epic that we're used to. It leans more toward the European art house, which I'm all there for. But so that opened today. And there's an article in Deadline by Mike Fleming, who I've been reading for literally decades, about that and how it came about, or almost didn't come about. But before I get to that article, there was an article in today's New York Times that I want to say that I noticed on Mick Garris's Facebook feed. Mick Garris is, of course, he used to be a journalist. He's kind of like the directors I always talk about. He's one of those guys. He was a journalist and a publicist, but he was a journalist like Godard Truffaut at Cahiers du Cinema. He did a lot of writing and stuff. He was actually, the first Hollywood meeting I ever had was at Ernie's Taco House on Lancashire with, actually on Vineland. Vineland? It's when it turns I forget. Anyway, Ernie's Taco House, right by the 134-101 interchange, with him and Taylor White. And it was a lot of fun. Really nice guy. I worked on his movie Sleepwalkers. But he posted this New York Times essay today, and I wanted to start by reading it. And let's share it. How bad can it get for Hollywood? Now, this is by Mark Harris. And Mr. Harris is a cultural historian and the author of Pictures and a Revolution, 5 Movies and the Birth of New Hollywood. This is dated today. The Academy Awards ceremony, which this year will take place on March 10th, traditionally provides a reliable moment of optimism for a perennially prolonged exercise and collective congratulation, and in early March, the rest of the year still looks bright. The Sundance Film Festival and its attendant bidding wars have wrapped up, offering nothing but promise and excitement. At the box office, the biggest bets of the year have typically not yet opened yet, and thus have not yet bombed. Every unreleased movie on the schedule might be a great one. Every year feels as if it just might be the biggest year ever. But not this year. For Hollywood, 2023 was not so much a disaster as a preview of disasters to come. Sure, one of the big stories last year was the Barbenheimer phenomenon, 2 celebrated hits that marched arm in arm toward a combined 21 Oscar nominations. But everywhere else you look, the prognosis is grim. The industry, still staggering back from the pandemic shutdowns, was hit with twin strikes that brought production to a halt for 6 months. Writers, actors, and virtually the rest of the Hollywood workforce were united in animus against the studio bosses, who, in their refusal to cut necessary deals, blithely cast themselves in the roles of supervillains. That fury persists, Each new headline about the huge compensation package for Bob Iger, Disney's chief executive, or decisions by David Zaslav, the chief executive of Warner Brothers Discovery, to shelve entire projects for tax write-offs undergirds a prevailing narrative that the people who finance the movies are becoming the enemies of the people who make them. You know, we heard today or yesterday that obviously I've covered this, but the Coyote versus Acme movie, where Wile E. Coyote took on the Acme company for never allowing him to have product that would let him get the Roadrunner, a Roger Rabbit-esque adaptation of an essay written back in 1990. Sounds great. And we had one of the stars of the movie talk about finally seeing it and thought it was a wonderful film. I find this movie, the shelving of this movie, inexplicable to me. I can't understand why it's being shelved, because the premise is irresistible. It's a lot more interesting to me than Space Jam. But it's the second movie that Warner Brothers has shelved. They're writing it off, which means because of tax laws, we can never see it. And I honestly, I don't understand that. If it tested well and people liked the film, Warner Brothers said, take it off of our hands, and nobody wanted it. It's amazing. We'll get Red Notice that they'll spend $200 million on. I mean, they won't buy Coyote versus Acme, or Acme versus Coyote. I forget which comes first. They won't buy that. I don't know. All of this is happening as the industry seems to be realizing in unison that streaming services, those wondrous platforms that were going to carry the town into the future like magic carpets, maybe aren't a panacea after all. And hanging over all this anger and anxiety is the menace of AI, which threatens every human part of the creative food chain, from the writers who pen the scripts to the actors whose faces fill the screens to, theoretically, the studio executives whose job is piloting hits. 2023 was a year of downsizing, diminishment, shelving, sidelining, retrenching, retreating, and bed hedging. And 2024 is the year of consequences. The plain fact is that thanks to the strikes, there simply aren't enough movies and new shows in the pipeline to give business the boom year it badly needs. This weekend's big opening, Dune Part 2, was delayed from its original 2023 premiere date because of the strike's disruption. For Hollywood, it will take at least a full year for the supply lines to start flowing at capacity again, and there are fewer supply lines than there used to be. Only 5 of the legacy movie companies still operate as traditional studios, and one of those, Paramount, is up for sale. As for new projects, the industry's currently whispered motto seems to be, just survive till 25. By the way, with AI coming down the pipeline, in 2025, people might be able to create their own movies at home. I think that's a dumb strategy. You never wait. What are you waiting for? As for new projects, the industry's current whispered motto seems to be just survive till 2025. Writers and producers pitching projects are being warned to keep expectations at basement level. Nobody's buying, everybody's cutting costs, caution rules, and the boom times are over. To quote Tony Soprano, the main character in a hit show back when a golden age seemed to be dawning, not dimming, things are trending downward. He had no idea how prescient he was. If Hollywood were a big summer movie, we'd be right at the end of Act 2, at the always darkest before the dawn moment of the story, when all seems lost. Or, as one agent put it to me, a lot of us are feeling like we're working in the aftermath of an industry, not an industry. But as any fan of Hollywood screenplays knows, this is also when the beaten-down heroes look at the redrawn battlefield, assess the new heightened stakes, regroup, and eventually triumph. The movie business, since at least the 1940s, has always defined itself by perceived threats to its survival. Changes of communist influence, the advent of television, and the rise of the VCR, cable, and streaming, and it's always found a way to rebound. In the mid-1960s, when studio culture was besieged and foundering and nobody who ran Hollywood could understand why the old ways were no longer working, it wasn't just that we were sick of the system, the director Arthur Penn once told me. The system was sick of itself. But that malaise, dejection, and uncertainty led to a major upheaval and a decade of churning creative excitement. The new Hollywood movement of the late 1960s and 70s happened because a bunch of great young filmmakers made a bunch of great new movies. Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate and Easy Rider and The Godfather and Jaws, that turned out to be huge hits. But it is worth noting that the people in charge The people in charge at the time considered most of those movies exceptions, oddities, and anomalies. The industry didn't realize that the world beneath its feet was changing. And that's where the movie business is right now. The system, it seems, is once again sick of itself. The industry has, for the past 4 years, been wondering when it can get back to normal. And it's becoming increasingly clear that there may be no such thing. There is only forward to something new. The industry is about to find out what that might look like. In the ashes of last year, an outline of this new normal started to emerge. It's a landscape that consists not just of big studios, this isn't the 1950s, or big studios competing with upstart indies that steal their awards, this isn't the 90s, but of a mix of new and old models, studios, indies, streamers like Apple, Amazon, and Netflix, the kind of out-of-nowhere hits, faith-based movies, and red state phenomenon like Sound of Freedom that keep taking people on the coasts by surprise. It's also a landscape that, like so many these days, involves Taylor Swift. In 2023, Taylor Swift The Eras Tour bypassed traditional distributors, went straight to theaters, and outgrossed all but 10 of last year's biggest movies domestically. If theaters are going to survive, this kind of communal event, the you have to be there with 20 friends movie dance party, is probably going to be integral to their future. One acknowledgement of the Swift effect came when the streaming rights to the Eras Tour went to Disney for reportedly more than $75 million. Hollywood finally stepped up with a tried and true old school principle. If you can't beat 'em, eat 'em, even if it's a very expensive meal. If the defining piece of good news for the studios in 2023 was Barbenheimer, the industry seems unwilling to learn from its success. Barbenheimer suggested that audiences might get excited when two huge, very different films open on the same day. But studios, which used to compete head-to-head almost every weekend, now try desperately to avoid those scheduling clashes. Astonishingly, several weekends into 2024, as of now, have not had even one big new movie, let alone two, set to open. Oh, but they're coming. That's a mistake. Studios need to chase this kind of collision, and Barbenheimer was a useful reminder that old world studios, Universal released Oppenheimer and Warner Brothers released Barbie, are among the few entities with the sheer marketing muscle to stoke a bona fide worldwide event. 2023 provided two blockbusters that are going head-to-head for Best Picture, a Hollywood studio dream come true. But that can't erase the fact that the superhero movies, the industry's cash cow for the past dozen years, showed ominous signs of collapse. All four of Warner's DC movies underperformed, including Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, The Flash, and Blue Beetle. Disney's The Marvels, a sequel to Captain Marvel, which grossed $427 million domestically, earned a woeful $85 million. It seems unkind even to mention Sony's disastrous attempt at building out a Spider-Man extended universe with Madam Web. Superhero movies aren't done. Disney and Warner Brothers have locked in multi-year, multi-movie plans. Remember, Superman started shooting, the James Gunn Superman. And Deadpool and Wolverine is likely to be a hit this summer, but what had been a bulletproof business plan is in tatters. The days when audiences would faithfully trot out for every interconnected chapter of a cinematic universe saga are over. That's no longer entertainment, that's homework. If there's a silver lining, perhaps it can be found in an earlier superhero film, one that premiered among great doubts about the industry 35 years ago. In the summer of 1989, prestige Hollywood movie making was in a rut, and anxious executives fretted that maybe young people just wanted to stay home and watch MTV, much in the same way they now worry that youth are addicted to bite-sized TikToks. But in 1989, the success of director Tim Burton's Batman and the unexpected breakout hits The Little Mermaid, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and Do the Right Thing opened up new vistas of possibility. Three genres that had been written off as marginal, comic book movies, animation, indies, became gold mines. Hollywood may not know it yet, what's going to replace superhero films as the next reliable blockbuster category, but this current crisis at least provides an incentive to start chasing a reset. A reset, however, requires creative energy and imagination, and that's a part of the movie industry that legacy studios have spent much of the modern era trying to eliminate. Studios have moved into an age of brand stewardship, and out of the business of generating ideas and developing scripts. They've redefined their business as curation rather than discovery. That has to change too. This isn't a high-minded plea for the industry to become something it's never been. Instead, it's a pitch for the studios and now streamers to reconnect with the enterprising, flexible, relatively quick-to-pivot business model under which they operated successfully for a vast majority of their existence. Hollywood has a long history of toggling between spurts of irrational exuberance and deep valleys of clinical depression. Before the perils of streaming and AI, the existential threat in the aughts came from peak TV. That siren luring away A-list talent and audience eyeballs. But not everything that looks like an industry killer turns out to be one. The ebook did not end books or bookstores. And streaming, a business that, for all of its flaws, give more people more access to more films, will not kill movies or moviegoing. It's possible that the bungled decisions that led to 2 prolonged strikes, and maybe another one, the most vigorous recent attempt by studio heads to shoot themselves in the foot, created one unanticipated benefit: a green shoot of improbable hope, a serious delay in the completion of giant franchise movies. Given their recent disappointing box office numbers, a few of those decades-old franchises like The Fast and the Furious and Mission Impossible may have finally reached retirement age. In light of this blockbuster shortage, and out of sheer panic supply chain necessity, Hollywood is looking at and buying and even making plans to produce a bunch of scripts that can get off the ground fast and be cast, shot, and edited reasonably quickly. They're the kinds of films that don't require $250 million and a year of complicated post-production. They're films like Hamnet, directed by Oscar winner Chloe Zhao, whose last film was the underperforming Marvel movie Eternals, and Novocaine, a thriller acquired by Paramount starring Jack Quaid. Even Tom Cruise, who hasn't starred in a non-franchise movie since 2017, is teaming with Oscar-winning director Alejandro Inarritu. These are self-contained films that don't demand moviegoers have a PhD in previous installments or extended universes. They're the kinds of films you might sometimes wish Hollywood made more of. Maybe you remember them. That's what used to be called movies. So, go Michael Fleming. I really enjoyed that. Now, I have a few things to say. There is a producer that I met because that producer contacted me because he watches this show, believe it or not. And I had made a mistake about something that I had said. It wasn't a mistake so much as an omission. I had forgot that this particular director was going to be working for this gentleman at the time. And he contacted me. And at first I didn't even believe it was him. But it was. Now, he and I stayed in contact because he is, of all the people I've ever met in the business, the man, what he's sent me to read, he's like E.F. Hutton. The E.F. Hutton, there's a reference that dates me, but he's like the E.F. Hutton of, as somebody who read screenplays for a living, I know how difficult it is to find a great piece of material. It's truly difficult. This gentleman, I don't know what people he's got on the job. I know him personally. I've dealt with a delightful woman in his employ who's very nice and seems to know her stuff, but which makes sense to me. But he keeps sending me scripts that are extraordinary. And he sets them up. He also works on huge franchise movies, but those aren't his passion. And what he told me is that his focus is now on scripts that surprise him. They have to be great. I mean, he's got both. He figures out where great scripts are and cultivates them, gets them all made. I mean, he sent me some bangers, and they're not expensive. And if I were to tell you who he was, I don't want to. He's going to be on this show for the 1,000th episode. He promised me he'd do a show and I can interview him and then I can reveal who he is. But you'll see him. But he's incredibly talented, and if you saw his name, how many movies his name is on, it's extraordinary. And as a matter of fact, a trailer dropped and his name is on that very prominently on the trailer for a movie. I'll just say this, fucking bonkers. I saw the trailer, I'm like, oh my God. Actually, a lot of the trailers that I've seen lately have his name on them. And the thing is, he has impeccable taste. He has very specific taste, but he's got impeccable taste. And I have to tell you, I mentioned this sci-fi / horror script that he sent me. I mean, unfortunately, right now, it's a streaming movie, But I said, we got to get this to the theater. I want to go see this movie opening night with an audience just to see their reaction to what goes on in the script. And, it's a great deal. I can't say anything about it because no one knows anything about this movie yet. And I can just tell you the script is extraordinary. And talk about a page turner. I couldn't read it fast enough. Terrific stuff. But that's what he said. He's like, he has no interest in IP. I mean, he did a lot with IP, but he wants to find stories that excite him. And if you look at the movies, like look at Everything Everywhere All at Once. A major motion picture studio would not have made that. You know who made that movie? A24. I mean, I know friends of mine that are like A24 groupies. I never would have thought a low budget, well, not so much, but an indie film company, and I'd give it up. A24, I don't know what they're drinking over at A24, but they know what's up, man. They know what they're doing. A24, their pedigree is pretty extraordinary. You know, when they put out Harmony Korine's Spring Breakers, I'm like, these guys know what's going on. And then everything that comes out from A24 is at least worth watching. Can you say that about most of the major studios? But I do think, I can not speak tonight, but I think that, look, what's going to happen, I have said this, you saw the Critical Drinker say it about me, I believe that authenticity, not just individual authenticity, but authenticity in storytelling. Studios are chasing IP because nobody who works at the studios knows what a good story is. There are some executives that are good, but for the most part, they don't know. They don't know. And like the indie explosion, the summer of 1989, Spike Lee was a self-made filmmaker. You know, I always cite She's Gotta Have It. And I often lament the fact, you know, it's interesting. There's a lot of, obviously, Talk to Me. Obviously, this is taken off the original mold, by the way. Great film. The two brothers that made Talk to Me cut their teeth making internet videos. TikTok, Instagram, Reels. But the thing is, it's a far cry from going to make Reels to making a feature film. But I would say this, there is some extraordinary filmmaking going on in the short form space. There are some incredibly creative TikTok and Instagram videos that you can look at. You can find them. And incredible stuff that people are doing. And I would expect more of those people to be moving into the feature realm like the brothers who made Talk to Me are. But they're not doing that. Why? It's one thing to make a 90-second short or a 60-second short. It's a whole other thing to make a 90-minute movie and make it work. It's incredibly difficult to do. But I would say this. The studios are chasing something that isn't there anymore. The IPs that they're working on, Star Wars. Star Wars is 3 years away from being 50 years old. Half a century. The James Bond movies, of which No Time to Die was the 25th, is from 1962. That was the debut of that film. Even the Fast and the Furious franchise is 20 years old, and more than 20 years old. Where are the new franchises? You know, I would say something like I've often said, what is a new IP? John Wick? John Wick, 4 movies, Ballerina's a 5th spin-off film, and The Continental's a TV show. That's an IP. And if you look at how John Wick worked, it's not a bank-breaking, exorbitantly expensive franchise, and it's done well. I mean, it's not going to make $1 billion, but Wall Street's got to get back. And look, this idea of constant growth that's not what the movie business is. The movie business is their job is not to make a ton of money for Wall Street. The movie business, their primary function is to be the collision of art and commerce. You need to entertain. It's not just a product that you can look at analytics and go, you know what you can't find on analytics? Inspiration, originality. Because analytics can only give you, and it's only predictive based on what's happened already. By definition, Hollywood never got rich following trends. Hollywood gets rich setting them. And I mean, then Hollywood, of course, hey, there's buddy cop movies, and then you read 1,000 terrible buddy cop scripts for everybody who's trying to make money selling their scripts. That business has kind of gone away now, so don't send me your scripts. Don't do that. This one particular director, and maybe a few friends of mine, can send me scripts, but please don't send me your scripts. unless I say it's okay. Jeff can send me his script. But for the most part, Hollywood needs to get back toward back to what it used to do, which is find original material or find passionate filmmakers that want to dive into established IP or develop books, that haven't been developed or were not developed as well as they could have been, and there's a lot out there. But the thing is, what the impediment is, who do you get to make them? Hollywood needs to find passionate filmmakers that want to. I mean, Denis Villeneuve, Dune was his life's ambition, and you look what you get out of it. And I think people, they think Dune's going to open in $85 to $90 million. Already, it's completely exceeded the Thursday night previews. I think surpassed $12 million. That's a good Thursday night preview. So we've got today, we've got Saturday and Sunday, and you've got people going to IMAX theaters again, flooding. People know it's an experience, like Avatar was an experience. The unfortunate thing is, how many filmmakers can work at that level? Not many. Why? Because we haven't allowed filmmakers to grow into it. We take filmmakers that have made one great independent movie, like Colin Trevorrow, makes Safety Not Guaranteed, and then gets bumped up to make a Jurassic World. I mean, ask Mark Duplass. He's not too happy about that. But anyway, you got to let people. I mean, Denis Villeneuve, Polytechnic, Incendies. If you haven't seen Incendies, go back and watch that movie. It's a banger, and it's got a great twist in it too. So, why aren't people doing this? Why aren't the studios doing that? Because the studios do not know how. There's nobody at the studios that know what movies are good or bad because they're afraid to. They can't say yes to something because it might be the end of their job. Everything is done by committee. They don't know with what they're looking at, whether it's good or bad. They don't. You'd think they would because that's their job, but they weren't trained to. The last thing in the world studios want are movie fans. They want Ivy League educated, business degreed, masters in business, MBAs. That's what they want. And I get it. That looks good on paper, but that doesn't help studios make great movies. Nor do DEI initiatives. I mean, the funny thing is it's not representation that we need more of. We need more of people of all ilks making movies. We need more filmmakers. You can't hire somebody and put them onto a project because of some whatever perceived underrepresentation they might have. What we want to find is filmmakers that have a passion to make a certain film and let them make that movie. I'm the person that wants to hear the voices that I haven't heard before. I'm the person that wants to hear tales of new lands, new places, new people that I've never met, don't understand. Tell me a great story. Unfortunately, activism does not usually lend itself to great storytelling. Unless, an activist has already proven themselves, like, say, an Aaron Brockovich. And then you get somebody like Steven Soderbergh, who cut his teeth on indie movies, broke through with Sex, Lies, and Videotape, worked his way up, became his own cinematographer. Where are the Coen brothers? They got another movie. Well, one of them's got a movie in theaters right now. And what we need are more original voices, more filmmakers, more people making movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once. I mean, the Daniels haven't even made a movie since that. They won the Academy Award. They won Best Director and Best Film. They haven't even made another movie because I'm sure everything they pitched to the studios, they're like, what is this? Maybe they didn't have anything they wanted to make. I don't know. But that's what we need. We need what we've always needed. We've needed talented, creative, original thinkers that also know how to make great films. And we need the studios to give them a shot. Stop chasing $1 billion. Stop. Why don't you make a movie that costs $10 million or $15 million? Look at the low budget horror films. Smile, less than $20 million, $200 million worldwide. Make 10 of those. Look at the profitability. Everyone's trying to get a home run. But you know what? That's not how you win baseball games. You win baseball games by getting on base every time. Get those bases loaded and then have somebody hit one grand slam and get those 4 runs in. but you need the bases loaded before you can hit a grand slam. And the studios used to do that. They made a bunch of different kinds of movies. Who would have thought Glenn Powell and Miss Sweeney, Glenn Powell and Miss Sweeney, their rom-com has made over $200 million. No one saw that coming. And if somebody tells you they did, they're lying. Suddenly the rom-com is back. You have two beautiful people that everybody loves. Glenn Powell, movie star. His new movie that he made with the great Richard Linklater, who, made, of course, Dazed and Confused, School of Rock, Boyhood. They wrote a movie together. So Glenn Powell's also a writer. Where's it going? Streaming. I bet they want to put it out in theaters. The streamer won't, but coming on the heels, wouldn't you want a Glenn Powell movie in theaters again? Especially called Hitman, and by all accounts, it's great. No, they won't do that. They'll put it on streaming, and you know how much money it'll make? Zero. They could put it in theaters, and people who love this new Glenn Powell movie might go see it. They might make 3 times what it cost. So it becomes a free movie to put on your streaming service that already has a great theatrical pedigree. But it's not going to have one now. I don't understand this. I watch the business flounder. The core business of Hollywood is to do one thing. Make movies that the public loves. All kinds of movies. All kinds of genres of movies. This weird chasing IP business, I don't know where it came from, but it's bizarre because there's no new IPs. This business they're in, create IPs. You make a hit movie. I mean, everyone's excited about a new Ghostbusters movie, a 40-year-old franchise. Now, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire looks good enough. But really? I mean, look, I'm not going to complain. I love the apes. I love Planet of the Apes. I've been watching Planet of the Apes since I was a little fucking kid. Planet of the Apes came out in 1968. 1968. Am I excited for May 10th to see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes? You betcha. You betcha. I am. I'm very excited. Why? Because I love the apes. But Disney, they're not even promoting it. They own, let's face it, 20th Century Fox, that's the apes property, 20th Century Studios. Like I've said, where's the Go Ape button on Disney Plus? Why isn't there one? This proves to me that the people, again, I did a show on Steve Asbell, the current, they put somebody above him. Why? He's the quiet king of franchises. By the way, I didn't hit hard enough. Lest we forget, there's the first Omen coming out. So Steve Asbell has been overseeing Planet of the Apes, Predator, Omen, Avatar, Hellraiser. And Alien. And is he spending $200 million? No. He's not. King, that's not true. He is. They are. But the first Omen didn't cost that. And if the first Omen's good, but, what do? They hire somebody to split duties between Disney. You know what? 20th Century Studios doesn't need any help. That's the one studio that has the one guy at the top who knows what's up. He's the one studio executive in the last 20 years of Hollywood that knows more about these franchises than any other studio head. He doesn't need to look at analytics. I wish I could make a movie with him right now. I want to see that 20th Century logo. But, I made one independent movie 25 years ago that I directed and wrote and edited. But, that guy knows what's up. And what do? They hire somebody that is now running 20th Century Studios. He was at Fox Searchlight, and then they put him. Why would you do that? You have the quiet king of franchises right there, nose to the grindstone, not getting anybody's way, not looking for glory, just turning out banger after banger, reviving. Who would have thought? Now, I'm not saying the Hellraiser TV movie was perfect, the one on Hulu, but it was a lot better than a lot of the other Hellraiser movies, except the ones my friends like Victor Garcia made. Those movies are good. But I'm telling you, it's a crazy business, and it seems like the one thing that Hollywood isn't doing is the actual business of making great movies and TV shows. But that's not true either, because, you watch on Hulu, Shogun is a wonderfully produced series based on, you could say, I hate to say this, the Shogun IP, James Clavell's Asia books. But then there's it's a remake of a previously existing miniseries. They're doing a great job with it, but that's what we need to see more of. by people that know what's up. Now, before I read this second article that is more optimistic, I want to hear from you guys. What are you saying? I don't know. So let's check out what you are saying. 1001 Johnny, our friend 1001 Johnny, says, I'm sending you a tip from Bangkok, Thailand on March 2nd at 12:01 p.m. Bless the King of Thailand. Well, as everyone knows, Thailand is across the international date line, so it's already tomorrow there. So it's tomorrow, and it's you can always figure out because it's the next day, and it's like 7 hours back or something. Michael Piatowski says, Rob, did you see what Alex Proyas said about the way Bill Skarsgård looks in the Crow remake? I get where he is coming from. It must have been hard to finish The Crow when someone passes away. First of all, yes. And I know John Campea, I wasn't on the show yesterday, but he was not very nice to Alex Proyas. I would say this. My friend Dave Scow was one of the writers, along with John Shirley of The Crow, the credited writers on The Crow screenplay. Scow was there during shooting. By all accounts, Brandon Lee was a lovely guy. The people that worked on that movie take everything very personally. And the fact that they were able to finish that movie after losing Brandon Lee in such a tragic fashion is a testament to everybody involved. The Crow is a very special film. And the people, as I've often said, it is the goth Blade Runner. It truly is. And finally, it's 30 years old this year. And to celebrate, Paramount is putting out a new Blu-ray, a 4K disc. I hope they don't fuck this up. Please don't fuck it up, because this is not an easy movie to do a good transfer of. It mostly takes place at night. It mostly takes place at night. So please make sure the transfer is good, Paramount. I know you've already done the transfer. Fingers crossed. But yeah, I mean, Bill Skarsgård, the people, look, they made one of the worst sequels I ever saw. No offense, Mr. Pope, but that The Crow City of Angels, it was barely watchable. And then they've done other TV shows and other movies, and I get it. But that is like the Hellraiser franchise. It outlived its welcome because the first movie is so good, and it really is the goth Blade Runner. And I understand why Alex Proyas is. I'm a big Alex Proyas fan. He made Dark City, which I really like. He made the Nicolas Cage movie Knowing, that I quite enjoy. And yes, it popped up on my feed yesterday. There was a picture of my friend Dave Parker, who directed The Hills Run Red, and my friend Dave Hargrove. We all three of us went to the Chinese theater, that big, gigantic theater. We went 8 years ago to watch in 3D Alex Proyas' Gods of Egypt. Do we apologize? We do not. We do not. I own Gods of Egypt. I happily love it. And in my mind, in my continuity, in my headcanon, Gods of Egypt is about the planetoid that Dark City takes place on thousands of years later. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Do you believe me? I don't know. But should Alex Proyas have said those things? Look, probably not. I mean, why be unkind to people that really tried to make a good movie? I hope. Did I think Bill Skarsgård looked okay in that movie? I didn't really like that look. I mean, it was kind of redolent of the comic, but it was too sort of modern. Here's my problem. When somebody comes back from the dead to avenge the rape murder of their girlfriend, I think seeing a bunch of tattoos, especially that look like Jared Leto's version of the Joker, diminishes the wonder of it all for me. I mean, I understand he looks cool and all that, and maybe he looks closer to J.O. Barr's comic vision of what the Crow is supposed to be. But he doesn't look like the kind of guy that knows the William Makepeace Thackeray quote, "Mother is the name of gods on the lips and the hearts of all children." So, can't rain all the time. Look, maybe The Crow will be good, and it'll surprise us all. I hope it's good. I hope it's good. That doesn't diminish the original. And getting it on 4K is great, because that soundtrack, both soundtracks, they're amazing. And, movies are hard enough to make. It's hard enough to get them made. And Ed Pressman, who brought us The Crow, the producer, has passed away. So pour one out for Ed Pressman. This is just water. Don't pour one out on your computer screen or your computer. I won't do that. Or my microphone. That would be bad. But Here's to Ed Pressman, here's to Brandon Lee, and here's to everybody who made The Crow possible. Aaron Sleeper for $5 says, I said global market is why the PG-13 comedy and the rom-coms are essentially done. It's too hard to translate comedy, dialogue, and sarcasm into other languages. Well, Aaron, you're exactly right. That's colloquial. Humor is very colloquial. It's very what one culture thinks is funny, another culture does not think is funny. But I do think that rom-coms, for the most part, can translate, and this new rom-com with Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell is doing very well. So I think we can bring that back, but it is kind of a dead genre. But I would love to see, I would love to see comedies come back, because the world needs a real dose of getting slapped in the face with their own ridiculousness. If there's ever a time when the entire planet should be mocked mercilessly for everything, the time is now. I mean, I would love to see the modern equivalent of Mel Brooks. I know Mel Brooks is still with us, but to come back and do something as incendiary as Blazing Saddles, I'd love to see that happen. I'd love to see people cry. You can't say those things. Yes, you can. And we just did. Deal with it. I'd love to see that. Tony Washburn says, Rob, were you ever a fan of the CBS Radio Mystery Theater? Many of those radio episodes from the 70s can be heard right here on YouTube. I love these as a kid. Tony, the CBS Radio Mystery Theater presents, and then they had, so the CBS Radio Mystery Theater was on at 10:07 every weeknight when I grew up in Seattle. And I'm your host, E.G. Marshall. The CBS Radio Mystery Theater was, I swear to God, again, as much as Star Trek, as much as The Twilight Zone, as much as The Outer Limits and George Powell movies and Sci-Fi Theater on Channel 11 and KSTW, the CBS Radio Mystery Theater is one of the reasons I wanted to do this audio drama. I listened to it every night at 10:07. And what was really interesting about the CBS Radio Mystery Theater, and at the time, my little young brain did not, and some of it was terrifying. You know what? And I don't know if this is, there was an episode called Charnel House, and I didn't know what Charnel House meant. And it was one of those things, when, like, tonight's episode, Charnel House, written by so-and-so. And it was the one time I got up out of bed, turned on the light, and got my dictionary out and had to figure out, what's a charnel house? Because I didn't know. So shout out to the CBS Radio Mystery Theater. I love the CBS Radio Mystery Theater. But what was cool, I don't want to get my own way, is because it was CBS, they used all the music from the Twilight Zone TV series, as library tracks, because they owned all that music. And it was so wild. So when I listened to the CBS Radio Mystery Theater, I thought, once I recognized, like, oh my God, that's music from the Twilight Zone, I thought it was somehow adjacent. It had nothing to do with Rod Serling. But it had some really interesting actors on it. And so, yes, Tony, I loved the CBS Radio Mystery Theater. Franz Gagliano has been a PGS hero for 3 months. Thank you. I appreciate that, Franz. Thomas Logan, our friend Thomas Logan, says Universal's doing fine, Sony's doing fine, Lionsgate's doing fine, Paramount is doing fine, Warner Brothers needs to be sold, Disney needs to be sold. I don't know about that. I don't think they need to be sold. What they need to do is they need to be run correctly, and they need to have people. Look, Warner Brothers has the most knowledgeable home video executive in the business, in George Feltenstein. There's a lot of great people at Warner Brothers. They just need to be utilized. The problem is everyone's playing games. AT&T's playing games. Warner Discovery's playing games. They're all trying to appease. The last thing they want to do is concentrate on their core business. Why did you turn your streaming service into Max? You had HBO and Cinemax. Now, I know it was called HBO Max because of Cinemax and HBO, but I mean, I directed TV shows episodes for Cinemax. It was HBO. I had to become an HBO approved director, but come on. And rather than keep HBO, the Tiffany standard of cable that continues to put out amazing television. They went with Max instead. That to me is the ultimate. If you want an example of everything wrong with Warner Brothers and how the people up top don't get it, the fact that they retired the HBO name, kind of, and kept Max, is to me, tell me you don't know the business without telling me you don't know the business. Such a dumb thing. Just keep HBO home box office. Warner Brothers, HBO. I mean, it's so weird to me. Home box office was such a great thing. I know it was just HBO, but it became HBO like KFC used to be Kentucky Fried Chicken. But, fried chicken's bad for you. But now it's Max? What a dumb thing to do. Fat Steven says, good on paper, but not great on screen. Oh. Fat Steven, actually, there's 3 of these. He says, Fat Steven says, Basic Instinct 3, The Rising Denim of Pluto Nash. You know what? Don't make fun of my idea. I have a great banger of an idea. I love Basic Instinct. I have my quarter scale Catherine Trammell statue right there, which you can see it. She's got her legs crossed. She's smoking a cigarette. I'm not going to arrest her for smoking. Right there. I have a great idea for Basic Instinct 3. There's no reason why you can't bring Sharon Stone back and do a third one. And you know what? I don't understand. Basic Instinct 2 is not a bad movie. It's not great. It doesn't reach the heights. But Basic Instinct 2 is the Jaws 2 of Basic Instinct sequels. I'll defend that movie. I will defend that movie till the day I die. 1001 Johnny says, I'd like to suggest a new short film that released today on YouTube. Guff, Guff, a short film by Righteous Robot. Please check it out. All right, everyone, you check it out too. Guff, a short film by Righteous Robot. Fat Steven says, good on paper, but not great on screen. Hashtag studios. Hey, listen, Fat Steven. Fat Steven goes on to say they're chasing an imaginary creativity they broke. I agree. I don't you disparage my Basic Instinct 3 idea. You haven't even heard it. Lucas De Fiore has a great question. Rob, imagine you're with someone who's never seen a movie before, and it's your job to spark their interest in film. What 5 films do you tell them to watch first, and why? Well, first of all, watching a movie is an acquired, this is going to seem strange to say, but it's an acquired skill. And as I've said, a lot of my audience and a lot of people today can't watch certain movies. I always say the Antonioni trilogy, but Tarkovsky's, I love Tarkovsky movies. I love The Mirror. I love Nostalgia. Probably his last movie, The Sacrifice, that he made in 86, is his most accessible movie. But as much as I want to recommend, because it's a science fiction adaptation, I defy anyone to watch Stalker and get through it. It's out on Blu-ray from Criterion. You can watch it. It's a great movie, but you need the skill. You have to. So if you were to show somebody who'd never seen a movie before, and you sat them down to watch a film and expected them to understand it, it would be hard. I mean, you didn't say if they spoke a different language or not, but I would probably start with something that was primarily visual. And I might go with something like, somebody wrote to me and said, they left a comment saying they hope Dune 2 wasn't like Terrence Malick's Tree of Life because I hated that movie. Well, okay, but I wasn't saying, I was saying that Terrence Malick, it was those kinds of movies. But I would say I would say 1, I would show somebody Fantasia. Where there's no dialogue, really. Other than Mickey saying, Mr. Stokowski, Mr. Stokowski. There's that, but you get it because it's a synthesis of music and movies. So I would say that Fantasia would be a good place to start. Maybe Kubrick's 2001. Because again, Kubrick's 2001 is a primarily visual experience. and it's sweeping and epic. And if you're gonna, the questions that it ponders, that makes you ponder, especially if no one's ever seen a movie before, I think that's definitely a movie that somebody could watch and understand. Pink Floyd The Wall. Alan Parker's Pink Floyd The Wall. Where's that 4K, Roger Waters? Come on, man. Let's get Pink Floyd The Wall in Dolby Atmos. Please? Please? Pink Floyd The Wall might be, again, it's an extended music video, but it's something that you could understand. It'd be very difficult to show somebody a dialogue-heavy movie that hadn't seen a movie before. But since I've now given them 3 movies to get them down with the idea of visual storytelling, then maybe Lawrence of Arabia. Again, I think the visuals carry the film. Jaws, even though you have a lot of dialogue, you still can understand, I think, the story. And to be honest, I might go back and either pick an Asian film, something like Seven Samurai, something like a Jackie Chan action film, something along those lines. So, yeah, that's just off the top of my head. So yeah. So there you go. That's I think that that's that makes I mean, again, to deal with what you were saying. I mean, it would be the people that if you'd never seen a movie, that's where I was coming from. If you'd never seen a movie, that's what I was trying to get to. So, yeah. So there you go. BCH says, "Hey Rob, Mythbusters Adam Savage used the Dune popcorn bucket to make a diorama of a sandworm trying to eat an ornithopter with a tiny paw riding it. It's pretty cool. There's a video on YouTube." God bless that man. God bless Adam Savage. Is that true? What a bummer. I need to see that. I got to see that because it's not a bummer, but I want to see it. Thomas Logan, what is a bummer is what Thomas Logan's saying. Thomas Logan says, "Rest in peace, Michael Massey, an underrated legend." Oh, did he die? Wait a minute. He died, didn't he die? Hang on a sec. He died a long time ago, didn't he? Wait. Hang on. Michael Massey, actor. Yeah, dude, he died in 2016. Why'd you bring that up? Because he replaced Brandon Lee? But yeah, but he had a good career. I was like, you confused me. Tony Washburn says, also, you're a solid dude. Appreciate what you do. Well, thanks, Tony. I appreciate that. Not everybody does. I got criticized for my Dune stream the other day. Somebody said that, you should think about what you're going to say before you go onto these streams because you have a tendency to go off on tangents. Look, man, I'm flying without a net here. Sometimes I'm succinct to the point, and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm all over the place. But I try. I tried to keep it all there. We'll see. David Crabtree, USMC, is back. David says, "Hello, Sir Rob. I'm excited to announce I'm jumping back into production of the Cybermech Saga." So the Cybermech Saga is a comic that David is doing. Really cool art, sort of inspired by the Transformers, kind of like that. But I've got a set weekly schedule going forward. Also, I've been on the peripheral of the PGS for far too long. Expect some fun, thought-provoking letters. Well, David, welcome back. I loved hearing from you. It's great to hear from you, and I can't wait to see when you're going to crowdfund that. Bring it in. Think about this. We're going to do the the Imagination Connoisseur's book. Why not do like a 3 or 4 page? We'll make it 4 or 6 page because you have either side of the page, I guess. A short story. We'll put it in the book. You know, an illustrated. Why can't we have a comic? We could have a comic book short story. Jedi Knight of the Snyder Cut says DEI and ESG has ruined storytelling. Campea denies. Well, I mean, I don't think it's ruined storytelling. I think what has ruined storytelling is, again, putting DEI or putting your universe, like everyone announces, we're going to have a cinematic universe, like the Dark Universe, Universal's Dark Universe. If you put your agenda or your universe or all that before your characters and your story, then you're done. And I understand where everybody's coming from, but, you know, even the people that you're trying to help, nobody wants to see themselves represented if the story sucks. Because then it kills everything. It kills your point of view. It kills representation because nobody's going to put you in another movie again. So the movie's got to be good. The characters have to be good. You know, it's funny. I think that there was a lot, like The Sandman's my favorite comic book of all time. And there was a lot of people that bitched and moaned and complained when they said, oh, it's such woke casting. But if you read the comic book, even the Sandman, you know, when he fell in love with Noir, he was a black man in Africa. And they touched on this in the show. They showed when he was in hell and passing by her cell and they looked at each other. He looked like a black man from Africa when he knew her because that's what form he took. So the Sandman can have any form that he wants because he's inhabited our dreams since the creation. So people who hadn't read the comic didn't realize that. So that, to me, even back in the day when I was reading The Sandman in the late 90s or the late 80s, early 90s, that comic was before the word woke was in common parlance and used all the time now, wrongly, I might add. That comic was incredibly inclusive and no one complained. That was kind of the part of the point of that comic, and people loved it. I certainly loved it. And why shouldn't you? It was great. So look, what ruins storytelling is bad storytelling. I will listen to stories about anybody, straight, gay, religious, not religious, Republican, Democrat. I don't care. I don't care what color somebody is. I don't care where they're from. I don't care what their beliefs are. I don't care. If you tell me a good story, I will listen to your story. Entertain me. That's what a good story does. And if you want to have messaging in the story, make it a part of the story. If your messaging becomes overt and I realize, oh, you're preaching to me. Who the fuck are you to preach to me? Take your didactic bullshit and get out of my face with that. Come back with a great story. Don't preach to me. I'm an astute viewer. I get what you're putting down. Put your messaging in the body of your story where it doesn't look like your messaging. It's so clumsy. Star Trek Discovery is the greatest example of clumsy, terrible storytelling. And the people that love it see themselves in it. It's terrible. Awful. I don't like it. Jason Webster says the Japan Academy Film Prize Awards ceremony is this coming Friday. Let's hear it for Godzilla Minus One. Did anyone see the clip of James Remar, Ajax from the Warriors? He was on Sex and the City. He played Dexter's dad on a red carpet event speaking Japanese fluently to a Japanese reporter. Now, if you didn't love James Remar already, hail Ajax from the Warriors. I've loved him since 1979. Watching him he's 70 years old, cast James Remar in everything. He was in Oppenheimer. He played, I think, the Defense Department secretary. And I learned something today. When I saw him on the red carpet, James Remar, any recent news. And he's the one who makes the comment about Kyoto. Let's spare Kyoto, because I went there with my wife for our honeymoon, and I would not. It's a very cultural, it's a very beautiful city. That was true. He actually said that. And Christopher Nolan encouraged, since all the actors are playing real people, he encouraged them all to ad-lib if they found out things about their characters that they could add into the scene. And James Remar, that was a true thing, that he improvised that on set, and it was in the movie. So shout out to James Remar, and shout out to Christopher Nolan for allowing his actors to do that. That's why Christopher Nolan is who he is, and we're not him. He knows better. Fat Steven says, have you seen AMC's Pantheon animated series? Yes. Now, I've only seen the first season. I did a segment on that. That Pantheon series has if you guys haven't, if you want to watch a really, really fascinating science fiction show that touches on many themes from things that you already love, check out Pantheon. I slept on it. I'd never heard. This is the problem. I bet you're going, what? What show? No one's heard of this. I didn't hear of this, or maybe other people. Some people had, because there are people that love it. When I heard of this, I'm like, wait, what is this show? It's great. Now, the question was, there was a second season, and will they put the second? Like, I couldn't see the second season. I guess it wasn't done yet. I don't know if it's dropping on the same place. Can I see it? Because didn't Netflix acquire? Somebody acquired it. Did Amazon acquire it? Somebody. Anyway, Pantheon. You got to watch it. I guarantee you're going to like it. And same with Blue Eye Samurai. That's great too. Shogun Orta says, have you ever seen On the Silver Globe, Rob? One of my favorite movies. Interesting. So I can't pronounce his name right. It's a Polish name. It's tough. Andrzej Zulewski is his name. He made a movie with Sam Neill and Isabelle Adjani called Possession in 1981. Heavily edited when they brought it to the States. Possession is a banger of a horror movie. If you've never seen it, the people that have seen it know. If you've never seen Possession, directed by Andrzej Zulewski, go get it. Go watch it. Second Sight's putting out a beautiful 4K. You can get it from Umbrella in Australia. It's available. I have a Mondo version of it. Possession is great. Andrzej Zulewski, if you've never seen it or never heard of it, there's other movies called Possession. Make sure it's the one that stars Isabelle Adjani and Sam Neill. Anyway, so Polish filmmaker, he made an epic science fiction movie called On the Silver Globe. This movie was, while he was making it, the communists, because he was in Poland, came and they were afraid it was too subversive. They took it away from him. So he never got to quite finish it. But the BFI came to the rescue last year. Was it the BFI or Eureka? I think it was the BFI. And they put out a box set on Blu-ray of Zulewski's movies, including The Devil, which I had never seen, and On the Silver Globe. I had wanted to see this movie for a long time. It's pretty amazing. And if you're interested in seeing some Eastern Bloc sci-fi, it'll blow your mind. And the production value, the story, you check it out. So, yes. There you go. So, On the Silver Globe. Check it out. You can get it. You can see it now. Anybody can see it. I have the box set. It's actually right over there. I was moving it around yesterday, as a matter of fact. So I was moving my physical media all over. It's an ongoing process. It's great. Fat Steven says Stalker, a.k.a. Roadside Picnic, the 1979 Russian novel. Yes, that is correct, by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky, who also wrote a sequel to War of the Worlds called The Second Invasion from Mars. So, yeah, check that out. So, amazing. And it's funny because did I watch On the Silver Globe yet? Yes, I did. I watched On the Silver Globe. I opened my box set, which is why it was out. I took it up to the media room and finally watched it because somebody brought it up and I had it. It's so funny because I got the stack of stuff I want to get through. The Devil's great too. Or The Devil, which I had never seen either. So yes. So Manny's Manic Media I have. 1001 Johnny says, excuse me, the short film is called Gruff, Gruff, not Guff. Guff is different than gruff. You can be a gruff guy that gives somebody guff. So, thank you for correcting that. Hunter Becknell says, Rob, you said last night that you were okay with people posting poems. I said that's true as long as they're not Vogon poetry. Tell me how you thought my poem was. Roses are red, violets are blue. All I have left to say is happy birthday to you. I was surprised it took so long for somebody to say it. Thank you For those of you who don't know, it's an ongoing birthday joke that happens every day to me now, even though my birthday's 2.5 months away. So prepare. Hopefully I'll get to my 1,000th episode of Robservations on my birthday. That's the plan. $5 from Thomas Logan. My godfather, Michael Massey, co-stars in The Crow. He unfortunately accidentally shot Brandon Lee. He quit the biz after the accident. Thankfully, he came back. I didn't know that was your godfather. Now, if memory serves, wasn't he the guy that was with he's the guy that was with the mother, and the Crow kills him and drags him into the bathroom, and that's when he says, mother's the name of God on the lips and hearts of all children. Isn't that scene? David Crabtree says, I could do the prologue for the Cybermech saga, Rob. I follow your shuttle into the shuttle bay. Well, you can do that. Mario Lopez says, my people don't speak Portuguese and Shogun. Where's my TEI? That's very funny. But you know what? A legitimate concern. The Portuguese had Japan all sewed up. So why aren't they speaking Portuguese? A very good question, because they'd have to get actors that were fluent in Portuguese. I'm with you, Mario. Say hi to your mom for me, by the way. Gotta watch. Oh yeah, this is true. Tony Washburn says you gotta watch out for James Remar. He may or may not be the guy that was playing with his shotgun and blew a hole in one of the walls of the set of Aliens. This allegedly sent Al Matthews, Sergeant Apone, into a fury, and he was an actual Vietnam vet. I've heard that story. I think that story is true, and I think you might be right about that. But I still love James Remar. That was dumb. Not a good way to be. So, yeah. King Tannic says, been a while since I caught a stream. Digging the shelf lights. Also saw Dune 2 on Sunday. Brilliant. I wish it was 30 minutes longer for pacing, though. King Tannic, I hope everything's okay. I look forward to your return to the channel. I hope you do. We all miss. Don't we? Don't we all miss the show? The otaku experience? I know I miss it. Let's see if I'm missing. Some old guy in Hawaii says, I don't get the hate over gods of Egypt. Okay, I do, but I enjoyed it. It's about mythical gods. They can look any way they want, can't they? Yes, some old guy in Hollywood. They can. They can, damn it. 100%. So let's see. I'm just checking to make sure I've caught up on everybody's everybody. I don't want to miss anybody. I think I've caught up. Darth Plato says, "Hey Rob, another day, another birthday." Lipstick Train Face says, "I'm having a good time imagining a Ted Lasso-y Superman, flying all around, dripping with positivity. In a very corrupt world full of psychos, monsters, and murderers, keep up the great stream." Well, Lipstick Train Face, that's easily one of my favorite names for anybody on this channel. So thank you for that. Look, no one is more excited about James Gunn's Superman than I am. Like, all the hate, all the people want to just give him a chance. Give him a chance. I think he's going to surprise everybody. Let's see. Matthew Batron. Matthew. It's Matthew, right? Matthew Batron, not Matthew. He's a PGS hero. Welcome becoming a member. There's no member call tomorrow. There will be a member call next week. We had a member call last week. Now, listen, everyone. I've got another article to read. Let's jump into the next article. Now, this article, the last article, is full of pessimism and talked about where the industry is at. But this article I picked because it is, of course, written by a different person. And this article, that last article is written by Mark Harris. But this article, again, as I promised, is written by someone I'm a big fan of. If I can find it, what did I do? What did I do with the article? I put it somewhere. and perhaps I can find it again. I don't know where it went. Well, I'll just find it. I can find it now. So this is the Michael Fleming article that I wanted to read, and I don't know, did I accidentally nuke the article? I think I accidentally maybe nuked it. So let me find it again, and I will put the article back up. Sometimes I do that. What can you do? But I didn't mean to. Yes, I accidentally got rid of the article. So I'll find it. But anyway, give me a minute. So this article is about Dune, and it looks into how did Dune get made, what went into making it, and how were they able to get past and surmount the obstacles that occurred when they were making it. So this article is really interesting, and it comes to us from Michael Fleming, and it is called, it's The Fire Behind the Film, Dune. So let's just jump into it. Here it is, The Fire Behind the Film, Dune Part 2. Now, this is a fascinating look. And why is it that you can't seem to read this article? Here we go. And we have it popped up. And I'll read this. This is fascinating. When movies come out, we grade them with reviews, define them with box office returns or eyeballs on streaming service, and maybe trophies down the line, but every successful, ambitious film starts with a dream, followed by compromise and adversity. Deadline offers the occasional peek into the creative aspirations and the sweat and blood that propels ambitious films. Dune Part 2. When one looks at properties that invite the visual and storytelling world building that every great filmmaker desires, there isn't much around that rises to the occasion of films like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, or any number of films made by Ridley Scott, George Miller, and James Cameron. With rapturous reviews and every expectation that it will outpace opening weekend projections that approach $80 million, the Dune franchise will be on that list shortly. Once turned into a David Lynch adaptation that fell short, Denis Villeneuve's ambition in Dune Part 2 is as big as the film's giant sandworms that haunt the ships ravaging the desert-covered planet Arrakis. But for a while at least, the COVID pandemic looked like it might swallow worm-like those ambitions to launch a great franchise. For Legendary, the prospect of having the full devotion of Villeneuve and emerging young stars Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya in an adaptation of Frank Herbert's sci-fi novels is the reason that heads Josh Grodd and Mary Parent got into the game. Legendary put up 80% of the first film's budget, but Warner Brothers exercised its contractual rights and put Dune among a year's worth of the studio's entire feature film slate to open day and date in theaters as well as its streaming service, then called HBO Max. The move was somewhat understandable from the studio side. No one was going to the movies in 2021 as COVID continued to rage. Why not try and build its paid streaming subscription base while clearing out inventory? The disruptive move was not handled gracefully. Operation Popcorn became known to the filmmakers and talent of all of those films the same moment it was publicly announced. No one ever talked to the filmmakers. There were testy talks between reps of stars to be made whole on losses from back-end deals. Even though he had no film in this day-and-date batch, Christopher Nolan was outraged enough that his long fealty to Warner Brothers was over, and he made the Oscar frontrunner Oppenheimer at Universal. But it was a different matter for Legendary. They'd footed almost all the production costs of Dune, not Warner Brothers, only to be blindsided by the realization their signature franchise might be dead before it even came out. I remember, this is Michael Fleming speaking now, I remember being at a COVID-stunted Toronto Film Festival and trudging over to an IMAX theater and watching Villeneuve take the stage. Looking a bit gobsmacked by all that happened, he defiantly pointed to his right and upward as he told those assembled, "I made this film for that screen." The lights went out, and Villeneuve showed how he had painted on that 100-foot canvas like a master. It was so compelling that I would argue that anyone who watched Dune on TV or on a smaller device didn't see the film. After testy exchanges and threats of lawsuits, legendary CEO Grode and producer and chairman of worldwide production Mary Parent were faced with a tough decision. Double down and trust the elements and potential that looked beyond the pandemic-stunted results of the day-and-date strategy, or fold. Now, what it's important to realize here is the two heads that are running Legendary. I used to know Thomas Tull and a little bit John Jashney because I work with them on Superman Returns. These are new people there. I didn't know them. Because Dune, it was respectable. It made $400 and something million even during the pandemic. They expected it to make more. And by all accounts, they shouldn't have made a second one. But you know what? They foot the bill. They paid the money, 80% of it. That's a lot of money. They had tens of millions, $100 million plus on the line that they owed back to their own investors and the banks and all that. A lot of people would have folded and would have said, you know what? We're not going to make Dune 2. But you know what? They believed in their filmmaker. They put their money where their mouth is. And they did something extraordinary that Hollywood needs to do more of, because they knew. They didn't have to read spreadsheets or analytics. They knew. The two of them knew. The two of them that got the money, that took the risk, they knew. They made the call. That takes brass balls, Mary Parent. Good for you. Would a studio executive stick their neck out that way? Could they even do it? No, because they're not the ones. The problem is the studio executives are not the custodians of the cash. They're just terrified to lose their jobs. But these people were. So, they were faced with a tough decision. Do they double down and trust the elements and the potential of Dune 2 that looked beyond the pandemic-stunted results of the day-and-date box office of Dune 1? Or do they fold? At the time this happened, the folks at Legendary were really proud of the film and not happy with how things were going, meaning at Warner Brothers. Villeneuve told Deadline. They had somewhat reassured me, saying they truly believed in the first one, and that would have taken it would have taken a catastrophe to have not made Dune Part 2. The good news is the winds did blow in our favor, and then Mary Parent at Legendary said, make sure the screenplay will be ready to go. We wanted to jump into Part 2 as quickly as possible because it's not a sequel. It's really the continuity of a first movie. And we wanted to make sure we could bring this to the world as fast as possible. Shout out to Mary Parent. Here's somebody who's rolling the dice. You know, as they said in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, dice are rolling. That's the shoot from the hip. They know best. Mary Parent knew best. The people at Legendary knew best. They're not going to wait for some analytics, although analytics play a part, as you'll soon find out. But they made a choice. They knew what they had in Villeneuve. They knew what they had in Dune Part 2, and they weren't going to wait around after they got fucked. Make no mistake, fucked by AT&T and that regime that had taken over Warner Brothers' day-and-date strategy. Fuck that. Get out of here. You lost hundreds of millions of dollars, you idiots. But anyway, Mary Parent to the rescue. Shout out to Mary Parent. Needing to justify another huge bet to Legendary investors, Grode said, they found a formula that allowed them to project what the U.S. grosses might have been were they not marginalized by the pandemic and the streaming situation. It gave the confidence to take the plunge on a film believed to have cost around $190 million. Now, this is extraordinary. This is extraordinary to me. These people that financed the movie believed so much in the film that they went out and did studies on how much the movie would have made if the pandemic wasn't raging and they didn't do a day-and-date release on HBO Max. There are still people in the business that are worthy of the business. There aren't many. But this is a fucking shot-caller move, if ever I heard one. This is some baller shit, man. This is brass cojones time, where they're like, no, you fucked us, but we believe in our filmmaker. So we, who paid for this motherfucker, are going to go make another one. Fuck you. And I love it. Of course, to be fair, that regime, gone. David Zaslav, in. So it's a different regime at the studio. But they still have to go back to their investors. They have to go back to the people that are going to cough up the green, to cough up the cheddar and say, yo, I know this movie didn't make as much money as it should have, and we told you it was going to make more money, and we're coming to you with our hat in our hands. Please, sir, may we make another? We need more money. And they believed, and they convinced, but listen to what they did. This is amazing. This is amazing. We had a deep belief that the technical aspects, the artistry, and the storytelling were all there. This is Grode talking, the head of Legendary. A lot of the sequel decision was based on Europe. We opened the movie much earlier there than in the US because Europe didn't have the day and date max problem. I saw that audiences were responding to the genre. And so we did an analysis that was somewhat bespoke, in that we had to create it ourselves. Oh my God. Listen to what they did. They believed in the movie, but they did have Europe as an example. It was doing well. They knew it. They knew it. You know, I have to say, I haven't heard a story like this since, if you watch, there's a great documentary on the making of 12 Monkeys called The Hamster Factor that you can find on the physical media release. And they made 12 Monkeys, and they were previewing 12 Monkeys, and it wasn't doing well. They knew. The producers knew. I don't know if Universal knew, but they were able to convince Universal. Terry Gilliam knew. They knew that even though the numbers were not coming back great, they knew the movie was great, and they knew they had a hit on their hands. And they didn't cut it. They stuck to their guns, and they released what they'd made. And it came out, and the rest is history. That's the kind of baller moves that we need in Hollywood now. People that know the difference between good and bad. Not this cowardly bullshit where people don't know if something's good or bad. People that they've never made movies before, and yet they're calling the shots. This is an amazing thing. We opened the movie much earlier in Europe than in the US because Europe didn't have the day and date max problem. I saw that audiences were responding to the genre, and so we did analysis that was somewhat bespoke and that we had to create it ourselves. How much impact did COVID have at the box office, and how much impact did COVID plus day and date have? We went country by country. This is amazing they did this. For the major territories, talked to exhibition in Korea and France, box office people and exhibitors. Every country was different. In Korea, there was a big impact from COVID. Mexico was smaller. We put it all together to say, if we release this movie during a non-COVID time, this is what we would expect the result would have been. I mean, this is extraordinary. This kind of research, now these are analytics that they went after and found. I mean, to be fair, they probably wanted to have an outcome, so maybe I'm not saying they cooked the data, but they had to show data to people that were going to give them hundreds of millions of dollars, or tens of millions up to 200 million, whatever. So they know you're bullshitting them, so you have to be on the up and up. But still, the fact that they did this bespoke investigation to prove their thesis so they could get the money to make a sequel, this shows how behind they were on this movie. And in the meantime, someone like David Zaslav at the very same studio won't allow Acme versus Coyote to be released, or Coyote versus Acme. It's Coyote versus Acme. Unbelievable. They discovered some things that might bode well for another film that could be released and serve the communal experience, even as the first one was hurt by audiences staying away from public gatherings. The core fan base for the first Dune was older because the book came out in 1965, and that older fan base was not going to the movies because they were still worried about residual COVID. We found that there was some knock on our aspiring younger audience for the franchise because of Max. We came up with the right impact number in all of this that made us say, you know what? A second film might do. If we're 50% right or 75% right, you know what? We're going to trust in the film. We're going to trust in the filmmakers and the artistry let's go make the second one. Now, that could be bullshit, but I'd like to believe, because I'm an optimist, that it isn't. That they really believe in it. Let's go make the second one. We're going to trust in the filmmakers and the artistry. Fucking men. You know why? Because you're making movies. That's all you can trust in. Don't trust in your fucking analytics. Don't trust in all this bullshit. Trust in your filmmakers and the artistry. You have to know you have good filmmakers, and you have to know that they have the artistry. You have to have good taste. You have to know. Do you know who doesn't know? Most of the studio executives who are working at studios today. Mary Parent does. Why? Because they're the ones paying for the motherfucker. They better know. So good on them. Dune 2 exists because you have people that believed in Denis Villeneuve and his team behind him because they saw what they were capable of and they believed in doing it again. So Legendary put up 80% of the budget again. And if the movie is indeed as much as that's 150 million bucks, 160 million bucks. That's a bet. You're putting that on the fucking table and rolling those dice. But the odds are good. You're going to beat the house because you believe. Not only did they believe, they knew. They knew what they had. So Legendary put up 80% of the budget once again. Warner Brothers paid the rest and handled the marketing that the Legendary duo said was superb. Admittedly, Warner Brothers has a great marketing department. They did a fine job. The vision. If there was a North Star Villeneuve aspired to in making Dune Part 2, it would be Lawrence of Arabia, David Lean's sandy saga that Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey accepted, seems to be the high bar many filmmakers say they aspire to. The thing is that Frank Herbert's book was inspired by Lawrence of Arabia, and the idea of someone who falls in love with the foreign culture, tries to immerse himself in that culture, embraces it, and then betrays that culture is very close to what we're doing. Villeneuve said, I would say that Lawrence of Arabia is definitely a movie that was beside me the whole time I was doing this movie. Protagonist Paul Atreides wins his way into the Fremen, a clan that survives in the inhospitable desert and battles those ravaging the planet for spices. Even before she focused only on legendary blockbusters, Mary Parent was renowned as the producer you want on the set of a big-budget, logistically complex film that could spiral out of control. She's done this on films like The Revenant, managing to help Alejandro González Inarritu execute his master vision in environs that were so cold and isolated, there were times his star, Leonardo DiCaprio, had to tell him, the lenses are frozen solid and so is everyone else. Let's go back. Dune Part 2 had its own logistical complexities that could have been simplified if shot on a backlot. But she and Villeneuve felt it worth the effort to go all in and head for the desert, lugging all the equipment and IMAX cameras, and so did the cast. So they spent months in Abu Dhabi and Jordan, in sands that looked as untouched as the snowy landscapes in The Revenant. When I first read the book, you're transported into this world that it's so unique and original, you haven't quite seen it before, she said. When I look at it as a film, there are so many things that are very primal and very relatable and very human, and then you have the world building. It is crazy ambitious what Denis and everyone else on the team did here, and it feels so authentic, even down to the sounds of birds and animals. It's familiar, but unique. There really isn't a comp for me, though seeing Star Wars for the first time is one where I remember exactly how it made me feel. I do too, absolutely. But this is its own unique film. Obviously, there are visual effects. The worms are not real, the ships are not real, but much of the action as possible is. We were actually out there in the desert doing it, to the actors' credit and everyone else. It was intense just moving in the sand. When you see Paul and Cheney, the whole scene where they're with the spice harvester and you see them running across in the same frame, you feel it all. The intensity and the exertion and the heat, and that it's all real. It's not as though that was shot on a stage with a fan brought in and green screen. We built a big part of the harvester when they're moving and jumping between the different legs. That's not all visual effects, obviously. The harvester itself is, but all of that visceral action, all real. So doing all of that, the amount of people, of crew, it was very complex work to do on location, but I think that level of reality and authenticity comes through, and I think it makes the action that much more pulse-pounding. You looked out at those dunes, and it was otherworldly, and the actors will tell you they were squarely in the world of Dune. We all spent more than 2 months out there, parents said. We got pretty lucky and didn't have a massive sandstorm. But the sheer physicality of it, I think the crew really felt like they were part of making something that was special. And just the amount of work and effort to hike up the dunes and be out there, and you see it again and again and you feel it. When Paul rides the worm for the first time and then begins walking down into the sand and then moving up again, you just feel it. In Villeneuve's mind, the second installment needed to be watchable as a standalone, whether or not you saw the first film. The nature of the story is very different, he said. In the first movie, we follow a boy who discovers a world. It was more contemplative, more meditative in some ways. That boy is the victim of events, but he survives. In the second movie, he takes action. He becomes a leader of guerrilla fighters. He tries to avenge the murder of his father. It's much more of an action movie. I really tried to improve as director, la mise en scène. I tried to be much more efficient and conscious of the way I was directing. When I finished part one, I had the impression I had gone to film school again, about the use of visual effects, about the work, the setups of scenes, and the writing. There was tremendous work that had been put into the writing of Dune Part 2. Villeneuve shared credit with John Spates, writer of Part 1, to make sure that I would not fall into the same trap that I felt I was in Part 1. It's just every time you make a movie as a film director, you have the impression that you learn everything once again. And it was like a chance to revisit a world, which was the first time I was doing that, knowing what mistakes I'd done in Part 1 to correct that in making Part 2. It's like that. It's very intimate, the process of a director. And I think that anyone who finishes the film, you don't see where you improve, you see where you fail. If you stood on the set of Dune 2, you could throw a rock and hit an actor prominent enough to star in their own movie. There was a day on set where I remember standing there and I looked to my left and it was Christopher Walken talking with Charlotte Rampling, parent recalled. Wow, you're like, I'm in the presence of these great actors. And then I look dead ahead and I'm watching Josh Brolin and Javier Bardem interacting. I turn to my right and there's Florence Pugh, Austin Butler, and Timothée, and Zendaya, arguably all four of the best-looking young actors, or part of the best, they didn't say best-looking, best young actors of their generation, and all movie stars on their own. As a producer, you're like, this is all you could ever dream of, and sort of a once-in-a-lifetime moment. It was a moment I took in and haven't forgotten. We were between shots and everyone was just sort of in these little clusters, and I looked around and I was like, wow, she didn't count Rebecca Ferguson, Dave Bautista, Léa Seydoux, Stellan Skarsgård, and Anya Taylor-Joy, all of whom are above the title stars. The key to all this chemistry between Chalamet and Zendaya, whose relationship is as important to the film as the giant sandworms. Zendaya's appearance in the first film is brief, but she is a constant in part two, and it is difficult to take your eyes off her and Chalamet as their characters create sparks and the complications that follow. When we did part one, I remember very quickly there was chemistry, being that we were born between both actors, Villeneuve said, and that in between, when they were doing the promotional tour of part one, they became real friends. And that, of course, tremendously helped me because the whole movie is based on their love story. The whole structure of the movie is embedded in their love story, and through their relationship, we see all the drama that is being unfolded and all the tension. That intimacy, that friendship, that strong friendship between Timothée and Zendaya helped me because they were not afraid to go into more intimate scenes. So it was very easy for me to work with them. I don't know if I was surprised by the result, but I would say I was moved many times, like where I felt I knew I had a movie. There's a specific moment where I said, okay, I'm okay. We nailed it. I felt the connection between both when they were getting closer together or when they were growing apart. I felt the tension and I was very deeply happy with both. The film will give audiences a chance to think of Chalamet as a man, one who is convincing in action scenes. They include a climactic sword fight with Butler's sociopathic villain. Said Chalamet, training started from day one. I started learning the fight choreography in Los Angeles. I think Austin was already in Budapest. So as soon as I got there, we were working on the fight. He was a dedicated scene partner and fight partner. Not only is he an incredible actor, he's a super hard worker. He really cares about the work, and that whole sequence was epic. No other way to put it. Also key for Chalamet was a pivotal moment where he rides a sandworm. The sandworm sequence, scene 62, was shot over the course of 3 months, he said. There was an entire worm unit dedicated to it that our producer, Tanya Lapointe, who is also our second unit director, directed, and she was hugely passionate about it. It's such an important moment in Paul's entry into the Fremen world, his acceptance by them, other than Chaney and Stilgar, of course, and it was so important to get it right. It was incredibly complex. Paul learning how to ride the sandworm is akin to coming of age. It's a rite of passage, and one of the main reasons Paul is accepted amongst the Fremen, because someone who wasn't one with the Shah Halud, which is the Fremen word for the sandworms, would have died in that predicament, and Paul doesn't. He rides the worms. That's what she said. The relationship between Paul and Cheney is much... Actually, here's the thing. I say Cheney. I've been saying Chani for 50 years. And then I was on a live stream, Chris Score's Versus live stream on Monday, and I was corrected. And I looked it up. I've been saying it wrong. It's Cheney. Cheney, not Chani. And apparently they were mispronouncing everything in David Lynch's Dune, because it's not the Harkonnens, it's the Harkonnens. Who knows? I've had to readjust my entire viewpoint on this in the last couple of years. It's terrible. What Denis has done so beautifully is show the distinction between the older and younger generations, Zendaya said. The Fremen have had years and years of propaganda pushed on them. The one will come and save them. Many of them believe this. We're dealing with that generational division nowadays with the new generation of people seeing things through a completely different lens and with a completely different set of rules. Cheney is part of the generation that's fighting back against what she perceives as archaic ideas. She believes this is what's been oppressing her people. So her entire journey is one of sincerity, an honestness to learn and grow from Paul. She's falling in love with him, but at the same time hating what he represents, and that's what's really difficult for her because she cares about her people and she wants what's best for her community. Paul throws a wrench in that situation, and it's really difficult for her to grapple with, and she wants to believe that he's on her side. It takes him time to win her over and crack her shell, and for her to be trusting of him. Their love story is earned. Dune Part 2 ends on a cliffhanger, but there doesn't seem like much doubt that Villeneuve and Legendary will realize his ambition to finish the trilogy. It's the first time in my life, I think, that people are asking me so many questions about my next movie, he said. I'm used to being very secretive. I'm used to protecting movies when they're at their very early stage. I love to protect that moment, and we're at the writing stage right now. It's clearly not going to require the speed needed in prepping Part 2. Sorry, these books are not easy to adapt. I want to take time to do it right. I worked on Part 2 until recently. I was still approving the 70mm prints a week ago, and now I'm doing the marketing campaign, so I don't have time to work. But I would love to complete that arc, and I know that at Legendary there are no questions. Of course we're going for a third one. They started to talk to me about the third one after a week of shooting Part 2. Rotten Tomatoes shows the critics are at 83% positive, or nearly as sky high about Part 2 as audiences that are at 90%. It is generating early awards buzz, though with a film like Lord of the Rings, voters waited for the very end of the trilogy to award that trilogy a haul of Oscar hardware. The film's fortunes were enhanced by a mutual decision between Warner Brothers and Legendary to postpone it from a November release, which would have meant globally launching without the benefit of the film's stars because talent wasn't doing press because of the SAG-AFTRA strike. A rave by Oppenheimer's Christopher Nolan, himself the prominent maker of world-building movies, also helps. That first film, we had a pandemic, and now the strike's parents said we weren't going to sit on this movie for another year. Now seemed to be the best time for it, and if you watched everything from the press tour, I think it was the right decision. Movie superstition warrants that neither Grode nor Parent would speculate on a third installment, and that will only come if the sequel lives up to high expectations. But Grode said, this is 100% why you get into this business, because you want to be in a position to feel this proud of what you've helped make. I've seen it 14 times, and you just go, okay, this is the pinnacle of storytelling on a big scale. I'm just pounding it into people. See it on the biggest screen possible. This right here, my friends, this is what you want from your producers. And we heard it from the people at Legendary. God bless them. Grode and Mary Parent, you go. This is, I wish this was alcohol, but it's not. I'm just going to have to drink a toast with water to you. Well done. Well done. This is very exciting. It's very exciting to see that there's still people in the business. And by the way, they're going to have an epic win. They're going to have an epic win. They bet on their filmmakers, and they're going to win. And that's the way it is supposed to happen. So, I love that. I love that. And God bless them. God bless them for doing that. So I really appreciate that. It's amazing. Let's see where we're at. Ross sends in a tip and says, what is your opinion on serious, dramatic, usually sci-fi films that end on a positive note, but not from the protagonists? i.e. Jurassic Park and War of the Worlds? Is the drama robbed from the piece, or is it effective? That's a good question. I mean, it depends. While War of the Worlds, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think it robs. I don't necessarily. One of my favorite science fiction movies of the past 10 years is a Swedish film called Aniara. Let's just say it has a beautiful ending that is strangely affirming, but not for the characters. And I love the film, but it doesn't necessarily end well. But it's science fiction. I think with science fiction and horror, even if a horror movie ends badly, like Phantasm, when Mike gets pulled through the mirror by the tall man, spoiler alert, there's still something life-affirming about it because they had, it might have been a victory that didn't last very long, but they still found enough of their humanity, they dredged up enough strength and courage to go triumph, at least for a while. So even though in the long run, and then of course there was Phantasm too, but in the long run, Mike and Jodie, and they might have been defeated. I mean, at the end of that movie, Jodie's dead, and of course Mike is still alive, and you don't know if it ever happened really at all, but still, I like that. Aliens ends on a high note, even though many people have died, many of our characters, so it's interesting. Tony Washburn goes on to talk about James Remar. Al Matthews references this incident during a behind-the-scenes interview shot on the set at the time. He doesn't name James Remar. This may or may not be why James Remar was dismissed from the film and replaced with Michael Biehn, allegedly. I think that's probably true. It's happened before. Harvey Keitel was replaced on Apocalypse Now and in Eyes Wide Shut. I understand. Sometimes things like that happen. Cyberhunk 2069 says, Dune 2 was good cinema and great storytelling. I agree. I thought, I've never seen anything quite like it. The verisimilitude, the peak verisimilitude was astonishing. It really was. Ross says, there's a lot of speculation over Brie Larson's reaction in that interview. As someone in the corporate creative world, I know that reaction. That's the reaction when someone says they'll be in a regular contract and promise something and are never are. I'm not sure, Ross, did I miss something back here? Maybe that has to, you're following up on that. I mean, look, to be honest, I think Brie Larson got screwed. Take away what you might think of her personally. I think that the Marvels, you take a movie that made $1 billion and, Brie Larson, whether you want to say, well, it's because it was between Endgame and Infinity War and Endgame, still, they could have made a movie that starred her, that really made us love her, that told an epic story, that told something crazy, whether it was Empire Strikes Back, whether it was her Road Warrior, whether it was her Lethal Weapon 2, whatever it was, they could have made a movie that put Brie Larson's Captain Marvel front and center and given her a banger story. Instead, we got a sitcom. And I love those two characters. I love the Miss Marvel show. I thought it was delightful. And I love Monica Rambeau. But they did her dirty. And the Marvels, who thought that was a good idea? I mean, it's one thing to be a movie character and going in and appearing in a TV show. It's a whole other thing to take your $1 billion franchise and add 2 TV characters into it and expect it to work. I understand what they were trying to do, but I think it was a mistake. Anonymous writes in and says, Rob, I know you're a classic liberal. I know your general political beliefs, and as a conservative, I wouldn't change a damn thing about you. There's a lot we disagree on, but there's also a lot we agree on. Your beliefs are what make you, you. Never change. I really appreciate that. You know what I think is odd? I believe, like, America, the United States, the great democratic republic that we live in. Capitalism is the greatest, is the worst form of government except all the other ones. Isn't that what he said? Something like that. America is a great place. America is the greatest country in the world. We have a lot of problems. Capitalism, true capitalism works. We live in a capitalistic system that's completely bastardized. People are getting ripped off right and left, and it doesn't have to be that way. We were having an experience just today, a medical experience that had to do with Elizabeth's daughter Zoe that was incredibly upsetting. And our for-profit medical system, and I don't think profit is bad, but our for-profit medical system, the profit that's being made and the care that is being given are wildly out of sync with one another. And, we've got real serious problems. That said, this is the most inclusive, the melting pot. It's such a crazy thing that we're screaming about trying to paint everybody as racists and DEI initiatives when this is the most inclusive country in the world. We're a melting pot. Are we perfect? No. But if you travel around the world, you'll see things that are very different. And yet everyone here thinks that we're on the edge of the apocalypse and that we're the most horrible people on earth. People that live here, let's tear down the West. So stupid. You're going to be left with a smoking ruin. I mean, we should all be very happy that we live here. But you know what? You got to think about President Andrew Shepard. Who's President Andrew Shepard? He's Michael Douglas in The American President. There's a movie about a Democratic president, but he says things that are wise. He says that democracy is hard. He says you got to want it bad. And we have been pitted against one another, and by strong forces that are allied against us. We got to get back to our core values, and our core values are Democrats and Republicans working together. Because at the end of the day, we all believe, at least I hope we all believe, in the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. We the people. We've got to get back to those core values. We can have differences of opinion, but if we can't talk, by the way, people don't want us to talk to each other. The very foundations of this country are being undermined by forces that would love to see the United States being disintegrated. I'll tell you something. If the United States was not here, the world would not be a very good place. Despite all of our craziness and all of our hypocrisy and all the nuttiness that happens here, if we weren't here, it would be a dark place indeed. And we got to get our act together. We have a whole group of young people that don't understand why America is great. And I'm not saying that we don't have our problems, because we certainly do. Many, 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 many problems. But this is still the place where people all around the world want to come here because they can still dream. No other country in the world has a bunch of people like us that'll say, hey, man, I was thinking about, building a barn over there. Your neighbors will say, really? I'll help you. And then you'll actually go do it. This is something, now I'm not saying other countries don't have this, but America, we have this unique spirit about us. All Americans do. We need to get back to understanding that our core values, or we can just think shit up and do it. We don't have to wait for people, bureaucrats. I mean, we do sometimes, but Americans have that. If you ask for permission and someone says no, you're dead in the water. I prefer I've been saying this my entire life. It's better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission. Because if you want to do something and you go do it, then you can apologize later. I told this story just yesterday, but I haven't told it in a while. I'm going to tell it now. My senior year in high school, at Mercer Island High School, we had a building called the Mushroom, and it was this. You can look it up, Mercer Island High School Mushroom. It was this funky building, big open building, but it had this crazy roof, and it looked like a mushroom. And so the crazy roof, and then a big open space, big giant cafeteria, and at one bottom part of the mushroom, you'd come in and out and go into the locker bay. And above the entryway was a place that was right here. That the senior class would paint their senior class mural there. But if you sloped up, there was a big wall that came down like this, and it was like 4 times the size of this wall. So I was one of the people in charge of the senior class mural that we had to paint. And we were supposed to paint on this wall. But then when I walked in on the Saturday, we're going to paint on Saturday and Sunday, and looked at the big wall, I thought to myself, why don't we paint it on the big wall? We had all these great artists, people like Greg Smith and Stephanie Choi, all these great artists that were in my class. And they were going to do all the painting. I tried to paint an unfinished Death Star. I wasn't good at it, but Greg Smith was a great artist and fixed it. So we had the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. We had Mickey Mouse and Fantasia, but in a graduation gown. We had a dragon. We had a castle. Fantasia was the theme. We painted this gigantic mural. And I just decided, let's do it. I think somebody might have said, well, no one's ever painted a mural up there. And I'm like, why not? It's a much bigger wall. Why not? And then the senior class mural, the thing that I did paint was What lies before us and what lies behind us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. That was our senior quote. So we spent all weekend painting this fucking thing up. And it looked great. I have a picture still that was in the high school newspaper. It was also in the yearbook where all of us are standing on the scaffolding. You know, hey, we painted this mural. Monday morning rolls around. I get called in first period to the principal's office. There was Jackie Hallett. I don't know for sure, because back then teachers would never let you know what their sexuality was, but you could kind of tell, but they would never let you know because that wasn't their job. Their job was to teach you. So their private life was not something that they brought into the classroom with them, which was a good thing. Although I'd like to think that Jackie Hallett was, I really liked her, but she was bitchy. Let's just say she probably wasn't playing for my team, but she was bitchy, but I loved her. And she taught our government class. Student body officers went and took a class with her in the mornings. But I never wanted to cross her. I didn't want to be on her bad side because I really liked her. So I walk in the principal's office, and there's Larry Smith and there's Jackie Hallett. Larry Smith's behind his desk, Jackie Hallett's standing up. Clearly they are not pleased with me. Now I knew this was coming. And this is at the beginning of the senior year, so it's not, and I got another problem because I was elected senior class speaker. I spoke at graduation, and that's a different story. But the speech I turned in was not the speech I was going to give, and they found out. But anyway, so I'm standing there, and they're like, so, that senior class mural is very impressive. And I go, I know, right? I mean, it looks so great. We had all the great artists of our class. Everybody contributed. It was really amazing. You know, we got it done in 2 days. It's fantastic. And they're looking at me. What are they going to say? And Larry Smith kind of sheepishly is like, well, you know, and I'm like, I just thought we could have painted it on the little part here, but why not paint it on the big part here? No one had ever done that before. It doesn't look great. And they're like, well, it does look great. I'm like, it's great, right? What are they going to say? I know that they wanted to, I was going to get in trouble because I didn't ask anyone. I didn't ask for permission. Now I was going to beg for forgiveness. But you know why I didn't really have to beg for forgiveness? Because the people that painted that mural were all great artists. And I knew they would deliver. I was not the artist. I was just the guy. I was, dare I say it, a producer in this situation. You get the right people, but you have to know they're the right people. You have to know that what you're going to make is good. If it sucked, like that Scottish, whatever that Willy Wonka festival was they put on, the Fire Festival of Kids Willy Wonka things, I had to know it was good. And I never had any doubt in my mind. And I've never felt doubt ever when I worked on a project, ever. All the people I've ever worked with, I know they're good at their jobs. I know if I fuck up, they're going to catch me, and we're going to make sure the project's good. I have never once ever had doubt about. I've never worked on the greatest projects in the world. I've stayed at a certain level. Maybe that says something about me, but I know that whatever I've worked on, I've at least made it better. And I kind of like living there. I've worked on a lot of films that were deemed unreleasable, and I fixed them and made them really mediocre. I'm damn proud of that mediocrity, but on that day, it taught me an important lesson. It was like we thought up something, and it was awesome. And we were in a position where you could either do it or not. If I had made a phone call and called somebody, they would have said, just paint it the place where it always goes. But I was in a position where I had great people. We painted this big mural, and we saw it was 3 times the size it would have normally been. And for a year, you could walk into that mushroom, and anybody who worked on that project, and every time I walked in there, every single day of my senior year in high school, I could smile and go, we made that because I said we should paint it up there. And everyone's like, great, let's do it. That's what you got to do. So there you go. I don't know what that says. So there you go. That came from being, I think we should all be able to talk to each other. That's a long way of getting around saying that. RRTNZ says, hail Bob, on a very erudite drinker panel, your deep understanding of filmmaking stood out. Nice. Also, Chuck Norris never refuels his car. His car runs on fear. All these Chuck Norris jokes, they never get old. Thank you. You know, I had a friend of mine that I grew up with, that I went to elementary school, junior high, and high school, wrote to me today and said, "Hey, I saw you on the Drinkers panel." It's so funny. People still don't know that I do YouTube and stuff, which is interesting. The tall man, he and her. Yes. For those of you who don't know, you know what? I have yet to read. Now I'm going to go find out. Is Phantasms the tall man? Is the tall man like a hero of the trans community because he turns into the lady in lavender? I don't know that. I want to know. Do you know something? That's what his name, the tall man, he, her. That's hilarious. Phantasm's one of my favorite horror films of all time. But yes, the tall man turns into the lady in lavender, and the lady in lavender, he has sex with dudes. That's a progressive character. Boy, you play a good game, boy, but the game is finished. Now you die. Let's hear it for Angus Scrimm, man. Shout out to Angus Scrimm. I never thought of that. He should be. I would imagine. No one ever complained about the tall man or the lady in lavender. And the funny thing is she goes and trolls dudes in bars. She picks up dudes in bars and takes them to a cemetery. Fucks their brains out. By the way, my dad took me to see Phantasm opening weekend. We went and saw the first show at the Crossroads Cinema. My dad takes me in, and in that scene, when Tommy's having sex with the lady in lavender and she pulls out a knife and stabs him to death, my dad left the theater. He didn't dig that at all, but he let me stay in there because I was a young whippersnapper. And I got to watch the whole movie, but he didn't want to watch the rest of it. So the tall man, he, her, says, "Rob, you may have had a good birthday." Okay, I have to read this. "Boy, you may have had a good birthday, but your birthdays are finished. Just wait for your funeral, which is yet to begin. I'll come on your grave while I'll enslave your soul." I can't do it. "Your shrunken body will be used without permission to march destruction in my wake." You know what? Shout out to Phantasm. Shout out to Don Coscarelli. Shout out to Michael Baldwin and Billy Thornbury. Shout out to Reggie Bannister. Shout out to Angus fucking Scrimm. Fred Morrow and Malcolm Seagrave. Or Fred Myrow and Malcolm Seagrave. What a soundtrack. Oh, I love that movie. And, wait. Well, I have it in 4K. You know what? I'm going to say something since you brought up Phantasm. You know, I'm not a fan of J.J. Abrams' feature film work. Any of it. But he did do something I will be eternally grateful for. There's a reason why Captain Phasma is called Captain Phasma. J.J. Abrams paid to have Phantasm restored in 4K. God bless you, J.J. Abrams, for doing that. Thomas Logan says, to correct me, Keitel quit Eyes Wide Shut. He was fired from Apocalypse Now. Well, did he quit? I guess that's the story. 1001 Johnny says, "So Rob, I'm walking around the Grand Plaza looking for an anime or takusatsu figurine shop. Find a very good one. I'm walking between the aisles, and then the sister starts cryptically saying, 'Don't go there. Danger, danger.' And then I look at the very top shelf, and what do I see? Topless anime bunny girl figurine with erect nipples. But they were overpriced." Hey, you know what? Anime figures are never overpriced. Darth Plato says, "Hark, Rob, who told you about the Harkonnen pronunciation? I believe the word is supposed to have an O umlaut. Harkonnen. If you apply a meter, it works like Harkonnen or Harkonnen. I can't imagine why anyone would say hark at the start. Harkonnen. Harkonnen, or Harkonnen. I don't know. All I can say Harkonnen in the movies. What can I say? I always thought it was pronounced differently. RRTNZ says, "I also recommend Shogun. I love the book and the original miniseries. I did too. And so far the remake is excellent. Sonata is superb, worth everyone's time. Those first 2 episodes are great. Loved them. Loved them, loved them, loved them." Ross says, regarding Brie Larson, I just think when you put actors in their box and exclude them from the creative process, it can have consequences. On the other hand, letting them in on the process can destroy your work. See Patrick Stewart. That's true. But I think Disney products are opposite. Look, I feel for Brie Larson. I really do. You know, it was great in Room, and she takes on this role, and it turned out to not be what she wanted or whatever, but she still was in a movie that made $1 billion, and then she's contractually obligated to come back, and she's in the Marvels. They did her dirty. They could have made that character great, or at least potentially great. So yeah, I think it's terrible. I think it's a bummer. Thomas Logan says Variety reports that new unearthed data reveals that J.J. Abrams actually wrote and directed Phantasm. Coscarelli was just the front man because J.J. Abrams was 12. Well, Coscarelli was pretty much around 12 when he made that movie too, so that's quite funny. Yeah, well, I guess you know what, kids? All I can say is that the point of this stream was basically what Hollywood needs, aside from great filmmakers and great ideas, is Hollywood needs great producers like Mary Parent over at Legendary, who facilitated Denis Villeneuve's Dune 2. And we need producers that know what good material is and they don't back away from it. Because we need to get back to the core business of Hollywood, which was Hollywood, you know, when it started was the gutsy moguls who knew what was good and bad, who didn't have to look at analytics. And you don't need people who don't, the people that, look, why are filmmakers listening to anybody who's never made a movie before? I mean, why? Especially if you're Denis Villeneuve and you've worked your way up as an independent filmmaker. You know, people can give their opinions about whether movies are good or not. I mean, that's I think people should. There should be oversight there, but we need great producers that are supporting great filmmakers, and we need more movies like Dune 2. If you haven't seen it yet, I mean, why would you? It's only been open for a day, but if you go see it on the biggest screen possible, I would really suggest that you do that, because it is a wonderful experience, and it's something that we don't get a lot of. And on that note, everyone, I'm going to end this stream now. I was thinking about getting randos, but I'm not going to do that tonight. And we will bring back Midnight Musings. I just didn't get to talk to Lael or RM, but I want to bring it back. But anyway, on that note, I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson, and I want to thank all of you for being here and being a great part of the audience. And Tom Jr. Jackson, and we are all, of course, goof people, as Tom will tell you. I will be doing Robservations this weekend. I'm doing all kinds of renovations in here. It's looking great. Soon will be a Robservatory tour that I've been promising for years, but it never happens. But it's going to. And, yeah, we're getting there. So, on that note, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And remember, the sleeper must awaken.